letting everybody hang out 1 second.
Do you hear us?
Okay, everyone, we're going to start in a few minutes. More people are joining as we speak. Thank you so much for coming. Sal again, that's my name. I'm Director YY, and we're really, really happy to be able to make it here tonight from the privacy of your home. I know people got together. We'll see how it looks. We're very excited to be here. Manor, I hear a little feedback from somewhere. I don't know why.
Coming from you all.
I'm not able to. I don't
because I think I'm driving.
You muted.
Please unmute yourself and start again.
Manor, I hear something in the background. Okay, it is my YouTube video. I got it. Yeah. Okay, it's fine. Okay, good. Okay, everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Mezzo Sal again, Director of YY. We're really happy. We have, as of now, over 400 people in the Zoom event. And normally I like to say that thank you so much for coming, and you're coming out of this stormy weather. And in one way, it's easier to say, hey, you just didn't have to leave your house. But I think today, with Corona and the Zoom events, in a certain sense, you're really giving up more because the time in your house, the time where you are, is so valuable, and it means so much to us that you took the time tonight, in a busy night, it's like Rosh Hashanah, to be inspired, to be educated, to learn about what YY does, and it's really, really going to be an exciting event. I kind of feel bad a little bit for the people that are like keeping on coming in, but we're going to tell you a little bit the schedule of the event tonight. Hopefully it's going to be a really, really exciting event. I know it's going to be an amazing event because I've seen YY events before. They're inspiring, inspirational. Here's the schedule. Before we introduce Rabbi YY, we're going to have a few words from Rabbi Shlomo Cohen, who has been involved with YY for many, many years and was really the impetus behind this event. He had the idea, he had a lot of people who Baruch Hashem sponsored all different places to speak about that. It's a really big chance to have him here to say a few words. I'm going to talk a little bit for a few words about what YY is, what it is that we do. You saw the ad that says, few lessons from the Arab village. What does it mean someone is trapped in the Arab village? Why is, how does a woman end up trapped in the Arab village? How does that happen? How does that phenomenon occur? We're going to discuss that. Then we're going to have Rabbi YY's keynote address, which is the hidden lessons that we can learn from the Arab village. And what's so important that you learn tonight, there's so many lessons that we ourselves can impart in our own lives from what YY does, from what women go through. It's really, really important. And then we're going to have what we call the live rescue. You'll see what it means and how we actually rescue Jewish women. We'll actually show you an amazing video, so stay tuned. A video of a woman who was rescued. You'll see her tell her story quickly, as well as the surprise wedding. You'll see it's really incredible to see women and children that we rescue. And then we're going to have live Q&A with Rabbi YY Jacobson. Now what's really interesting is that, many times during the Zoom events, they say, hey, it's a live broadcast, and really, it's a pre-recorded video. Not the case. Tonight we're going to explain. You'll be able to ask questions through the chat, and Rabbi YY will be answered live. And if you know him, he's definitely going to be excited even before we start. So we're really, really excited. So more people coming in, but with that, it's my tremendous covet to ask Rabbi Shlomo Cohen, who has been around with YY for, I think, I don't want to date him, but at least I think 40 years. And it's a tremendous chus to ask Rabbi Cohen to say a few words. He just has to unmute himself, and once he's unmuted, have it on stage.
Hello, good evening. Thanks for the introduction. Sal again. He's the main force in our group today. I would call him the Minister of Technology in our office Spanish about rescue my nation from Haran Hashem. He said, Nafshi, my soul, and my crying, my asking him, my nation, my Keshosti, my appeal. Shaila, my question is the similar to him, that's the greatest. Why is it the greatest? Aleph, number one, why is change your language? So you say, Nafshi, Keshosti, Mami, Keshosti. Nafshi, my Keshosti, Mami, my Keshosti. Why is it changing? So the Lord said something new. In Rosh Hashanah, when you talk about yourself, you're saying Sheila.
says the boss calls in the employee, and the boss says, "Why are you late?" So the employee says, "There was a technological malfunction in my organic matter that yielded an unforeseen surplus of unconsciousness." So the boss says, "You mean you overslept?" And the employee says, "Yes, I overslept." There are lovely reasons why we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, but certainly one of the most potent and powerful reasons was given by the Rambam in Hilchis Tshuva, Perek Gimel, where he says that Ki HaShofar b'Rosh Hashanah Afal Pi Shegzeres HaKosavhu Remez Yeshboi. There is something, a unique symbolic significance in Tkiyas Shofar. It serves as a physical and spiritual alarm clock. Now, a wise man once said, no man likes his alarm clock. It's much easier to remain asleep. But to have an alarm clock is important to wake you up. So the Rambam says that the shofar serves as a cosmic, collective, and individual divine alarm clock, trying to wake me up, trying to wake us up. And I have to tell you something, waking up comes in many forms and fashions. And yesterday, I had, I think, an hour and a half conversation with Reb Nisanel, the executive director of Yad Lachem in the United States of America. And it really was a shofar for me. It woke me up. Because I knew about Yad Lachem. I knew the founder, Reb Shalom Ber Lipshitz, Zechreinu Livrocha, many years, who was one of the great askanim for Yiddishkeit in Israel in the 40s and in the 50s, when there were some very severe decisions to make, and the very future and balance of the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael was being decided. But I did not know the proportions, and I did not realize the numbers and the statistics. And I just recently found out. I thought it's a few dozen. I'm a little embarrassed. I should have known better. But I did not realize that there are numbers of approximately 20, 30,000 women, Jewish women, who are involved in serious relationships with Muslims. Some put it a little less, some put it at a little more. Inside of Israel and outside of Israel in Muslim countries, including in the liberated territories of 1967, including in Gaza, including in Yehuda, Shomron, West Bank. And we're not dealing with a few dozen, even a few dozen. Nefesh achas mistos and olam mole. We're not even dealing with hundreds. You're dealing with tens of thousands. And this was, I have to tell you, this was an alarm clock. This was a shofar for me. It was astounding. How does such a thing happen? It's not like we have billions of Jews. We have 14 million Jews. Thousands and thousands of young girls and young women are involved in these types of relationships, which ultimately, in most cases, become violent, abusive, horrific, and extremely oppressive. As Ibn Sanal just described, they're lured in. Most of these girls come from families where they were not given, I guess, the confidence that they need, or maybe other issues. And he told me, frighteningly, that close to 40% come from religious families. Not 10%, not 5%. Close to 40% of these thousands and thousands of women come from what you would call Torah observant mishpachot datiyot, or mishpachot charediyot, religious families. And yet these girls, these young women who have a void, are lured in by the charm, the looks, the charisma, whatever it is, of these Arab boys who ultimately bring them to their villages, their towns, their cities, their countries. And then at some point, for many of them, it's too late. Not for all of them. I'm sure some of them get out early. Some of them get the help of their family. But some of them, ultimately, it's too late. And as you know, women are not treated with the greatest dignity in many of these Muslim communities. Sometimes there's a child involved. If they run away, the husband may threaten to kill them or the child and the children. There are beatings. There is tremendous oppression. Intimacy is completely on the terms of the husband. I don't have to get involved. I don't have to describe this. Those who are familiar with some of the culture and some of the laws know exactly what I'm talking about. And Yad La'achim sometimes goes into enemy lines, literally enemy lines, to rescue these girls and women. Sanal just sent me a story, I don't know if it's going to be the video, of a boy and a girl who came from two families. The mother was Jewish, they married Muslims, there were many children. They managed to escape and flee, and a boy and a girl met, and they got married to each other just recently. Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. It's incredible. So this is going on literally on our watch, under, as they say, under our nose, in front of our eyes, in the thousands and thousands of tinoikis, and not only tinoikis, shenishbu l'bein ha'akim in the most literal sense. And it really behooves me to salute, it behooves all of us to salute Yad La'achim and all of its activists, its volunteers, its social workers, its former IDF and Shin Bet and Mossad staff, who are the only ones who can really infiltrate and do sometimes the work that is better not to speak about in order to save people in very, very delicate and sensitive situations, because if you make one error, chas v'shalom, it can cost a life, it can cost many a life, and it can result in absolute disaster. So this is extraordinary work of Atzalas Nefashos, physically, spiritually, Olam Haza, Olam Haba, in the most incredible and powerful way. What I want to address with you this evening, though, is going back to some of the causes. I was researching and investigating what would be the reason for this. Why would a girl be lured into such traps? Now, I cannot say, I'm certainly not the person equipped to be able to give a decisive and all-encompassing answer, and I'm sure it's never black and white. There's never one answer. There may be elements that are considered nature. There may be elements considered nurture. There may be elements that are a combination. There could be so many different factors. The journey of neshamas is certainly very, very mysterious. But there are lessons, I think, that each of us can glean in our own lives, whether we live in the United States, whether we live in Israel, whichever community we come from, any demographic, any sector. I think these are universal lessons that each of us can certainly internalize, especially during these Yemei Ratzon, these incredible days of reckoning, of introspection, of Cheshbon HaNefesh, of Tshuva, the Yemei Harachamim v'Haratzon. The first thing we have to establish, as Reb Nesanel told me yesterday, he says, it's always more likely to happen with girls who come from families in which they don't feel a deep and solid emotional connection. And this remains the first and maybe most important lesson. It behooves every single one of us, especially in our generation, especially in our corona age, to spend time and dedicate your mental space to build strong emotional bonds with each of our children. And emotional bonds with our children doesn't mean we do it on our terms. It means we do it in their terms. You want your homes to be places of love, of joy, places of connection, places where all the children can feel this is where I belong, this is where I can be open, this is where there are great relationships, this is an exciting place, and it's a non-judgmental place. It's a place that combines, of course, discipline. A home needs to have discipline, but it's filled with connection, with connectivity. Whether it's the Shabbos table, whether it's spending time every evening at a dinner table, it's the schmoozing and the jokes and the conversations and the singing and the games and the sports and the running around and the learning and the davening and the connecting and the arguing and the debating and all elements of family life, including those parts that are not always exciting, but they're all part of family life, the crying, but it's all part of bonding. We must remain present. Mothers and, of course, fathers. Sometimes fathers who are out to work or out to learn, and we are often a little detached. Today is a chayv kaddish. We can't afford it. We literally cannot afford it anymore. There are so many challenges. There are so many nisyonis. There's so much anxiety, so much stress. Mibifnim umibachutz, mibayis umibachutz. Lo yiseitzu ish mi pesach beisei ad boiker is what Moshe told the Jews right before Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's what the governments are telling us now in the Corona age. Lo yiseitzu ish mi pesach beisei ad boiker. And when you remain in beisei, make sure that there is a beautiful and extraordinary ambience and atmosphere of bonding. Your children don't always have to agree with you. They don't always have to be pleased with you. Sometimes our kids get angry with us, but they always have to know that you understand them. That's key. They have to know that there's a bond. You get them. You're not just sitting on this throne on an ivory tower and giving out rules. You get them. You understand them. You empathize with them. And you're here for them. You'll support them. You may challenge them, but you're always, always here for them. The bond is unconditional and unquestionable. I've shared this story before, but it's really very apropos. There was a very famous Jewish actor, quite popular. His name was Zero Mostel. Zero Mostel won quite many awards, and he was a Hollywood celebrity. He passed away, I think, in the 1980s. And, I wondered, Zero Mostel, who gives their son a name Zero? You know what zero means? Efes. Null in Yiddish. Zero? Who calls their son Zero? Anyway, someone shared with me the story. I was speaking in Lakewood, and I spoke about this, and a Yid came over to me. It was a big dinner in Lakewood. And a Yid came over to me, and he said he was Zero Mostel's shachan. He was his neighbor in the Bronx. This was a frum family, 8 children. His name wasn't Zero. His name was Shmuel Yoel. Shmuel Yoel. Okay, this was his name. Shmuel Yoel is not a Hollywood name exactly. So a family of 8, frumme Yidden, ehrlich Yidden, shomer Torah mitzvah. There was a person in his family, it's not negaya to mention who would tell this boy, Shmuel Yoel, I'll say in Yiddish, Shmuel Yoel, du bist a garnished, du wirst allemal bleiben a garnished. You're a nothing, you're a zero, you're always going to remain a nothing. He left Yiddishkeit. He became a very successful actor. I guess for Hollywood, the name Shmuel Yoel wasn't very catchy, so he needed to choose a new secular name. And what's the name he chose? Zero. He said, because this member in my family predicted that I'm going to be a zero, I wanted to make sure to give him nachas and to give him satisfaction, and became a zero. And I learned from this, if you are not going to make your child feel great, somebody else will. Somebody else will make sure that he or she does not feel like a zero, but it may not be in the way you want. And that's the story of all these girls. There was a Yid who I knew very well. I can't say I knew him well, he was much older than me, but I knew him. His name was Rabbi YY. Rabbi YY was one of those unique Jews who came from Russia. He sat in the Stalin's gulag. He was imprisoned in Russia for many years because of his counter-revolutionary work against the communists to spread Yiddishkeit. He was a Chabadske Chassid from the famous Chain family. The Rabbanim of Chernigov in the Ukraine, the David Tzvi Chain, the Peretz Chain. They have a shalshelas back to the Bali HaToisves, Rabbeinu Chain. His name was Reb Berke Chain, Reb Doiv Ber Chain. He came out of the communist purgatory in the 1960s, I think 63, and he settled in Israel. And he became a Malamed. He was a teacher. I knew him, echte Yirish Shamayim, from the genre that is very hard to find, where God is more real than anything else. Full of Avos Hashem, full of Avos HaTorah, full of Avos Yisrael. And this is a story that happened in his classroom. It's a story, I shared this actually, last year's Slichus, without the name, I shared the story. And after I tell you this story, I'm going to tell you what happened after I shared the story. There was a kid in the classroom who stole a watch from a chaver. He wanted a watch and he stole it. And the friend told Rebecca that somebody stole the watch. Rebecca tried to find out who and give back the gneva, but nobody wanted to admit. The kid didn't want to embarrass himself. So what happened was, he said, listen, we're going to have to lock the door, and every child is going to empty his pockets. So we'll figure out where the watch is and we'll return it to its owner. I have no other choice. But Rebecca said, every child needs to close his eyes. I don't want anybody seeing anything that's happening in anybody else's pocket. Everybody closes their eyes. Nobody sees. Empty out your pockets. And we'll get the watch and we'll give it back. And that's what happened. The child emptied his pocket. The watch fell. Rebecca retrieved it, ultimately gave it back to its owner. And that boy was so touched that he was not embarrassed in public, because Rebecca would not allow anybody else to see who the Ganav was. And he came over to Rebecca Chaim many years later. And he said that he himself was a Malamed, he was a teacher. He was inspired by Rebecca to be a teacher. He said, how did I inspire you? And he told him the story. Rebecca Ched said, wow, very interesting. He said, you don't remember the Maisa? You don't remember me? I was the Ganav. You must have remembered such a story. And Rebecca said, I wouldn't remember. He says, why not? He says, my eyes were also closed. My eyes were also closed. So I never knew who took it. I didn't want to know. I just wanted it returned. I shared this story last year before Slichas. There was then candidates running to be the president, for the new leader, the presidency of Brazil. So a future president saw the clip. Somebody sent it to him. So he had it translated into Portuguese, the clip, with my video Portuguese, and he sent it out to 25 million people on WhatsApp. I started to get from Brazil message after message after message after message. I couldn't read the Portuguese, but it was my video speaking. And he wrote, in the beginning, he says, we have to learn from the Jews about the gift of education. We have to learn from the Jews how to educate our children. He understood that Yiddishkeit inculcated into the psyche of Klal Yisrael, that the greatest gift in the world is how we treat our children. Let me ask you a question. The Gemara says at the end of Megillah that the Kriyas HaTorah of every Yom Tov is Me'inyanei Shel Yom. It's the theme of the holiday. Pesach, we read the Parsha of Pesach, the story of Pesach. Chanukah, we read Chanukas HaMishkan. Purim, we read Vayavei Amalek. The same is true with Shavuos, Sukkot. Every Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, you read Parsha Acharei Mos, the Parsha of Yom Kippur. There's an exception, Rosh Hashanah. If you had to choose the Kriyas HaTorah of Rosh Hashanah, what would you choose? What would you choose, tell me? What happened in Rosh Hashanah? What happened on Rosh Hashanah? Like the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah Chav Zayin, Musaf of Rosh Hashanah is the day we celebrate the anniversary of creation, the anniversary of Adam v'Chava. So what should be the Kriyas HaTorah of Rosh Hashanah? Bereishis bara Elokim Hashemayim v'Saaretz. Vayomer Elokim nasa Adam b'Tzalmeinu k'Dem Eseinu. What's the Kriyas HaTorah of Rosh Hashanah? All about children. We learn about Hagar, and we learn about Yishmael, and we learn about Sarah, and we learn about Yitzchak. And after we learn about Shmuel, and we learn about Chana, and we learn about Rachel Mavaka al Banah, all about children, and we learn about the Akedah, Vayelchu Shneim Yachdov. And then the Mefarshim come and struggle to figure out the connection from Rosh Hashanah to the Akedah, and the connection of Rosh Hashanah to Shmuel and Chana, and the connection of Rosh Hashanah to Hagar and Yishmael, and Hashem Pakad Sarah. What's the connection? Why don't you just read Me'inyanei Shel Yom, anniversary of creation? One of the explanations, my dearest friends, is how do Jews celebrate the creation of the cosmos? How do we celebrate the creation of mankind? How do we celebrate the existence of our extraordinary universe that is so mind-staggering in its brilliance and in its dazzling wisdom and stupendous beauty? How do we celebrate it? We celebrate it by focusing on the miracle of children. We celebrate it by focusing on our great privilege to bring children to the world and to raise them amidst the struggle, amidst the turmoil, amidst the challenges. As parents, as educators, we must emulate those individuals who understand what it means to have a heart. Never ever to make that child feel like a zero. Never ever to make that child feel like a loser, like a thief. To be able to see the positive, to be able to accentuate the milus, to be able to believe in them so that they can believe in themselves. Which brings us to another extraordinary prerequisite of this entire approach, the prerequisite of this work of Yad La'achem, and a tremendous lesson. And that is, never do you give up auf a Yiddische Neshama. Never do you surrender to despair. I am telling you, hearing some of the stories and seeing what's going on, Yad Lachem is involved today with 10,000 cases. Now, you might think I'm exaggerating. I can't give you the names of the 10,000. But I spoke to the organizer. They tell me Yad Lachem is involved with 10,000 cases in one way or another. Some cases are very serious. Some cases are less serious. Some cases need minimal involvement. And some cases need dramatic involvement. But there's 10,000 cases on the records of Yad Lachem. What's the greatest lesson here? You never give up on a Jewish soul. It's very easy to say, Faloyon and Neshama, it's a lost case. But when you believe in them, and you connect to them, and you show them a brighter future, it's incredible how much could be accomplished. Incredible. And it reminds me of something that just happened in Israel. And I feel it's an incredible lesson. I don't know if you read about it or you heard about it, but it was really, it mamash happened just a few days ago. I saw the story in the New York Times on September 7th or September 8th, mamash recently. Incredible, what the New York Times, who's not chashud in extra amuna, called a scientific miracle. Ma'aseh shaya kach haya. The 1960s, Israel was excavating the Masada, the famous mountain, the fortress of the Zealots that fell in the year 73 after the Common Era, a few years after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and they found there seeds of a date palm tree. What the Chumash calls in Parashas Eikev, Eretz Chitus, Sa'ir, V'gefen, V'te'en, V'rimen, Eretz Zeis, Shemen, Udvash. Chazal say, what's Dvash? Dvash is Dvash Tmorim, the honey that comes from the dates. They found such seeds that Chazal and the Tanakh extolled the dates of Eretz Yisrael. The Tmorim and the Dvash of Eretz Yisrael. It's called Eretz Zavas Cholav Dvash. Dvash is not the bee of Dvash. Dvash is Dvash Tmorim, Dvash of dates. They found the seeds. It remained dormant. In 2005, some botanists decided to do what seemed like the impossible and plant it. And they planted it. They didn't think anything will happen. You know what happened? It started to grow saplings. They were astounded. The seed came to life. And they named this sapling the Mesushelach tree. Because like Mesushelach, it lived close to a millennium, but this lived more than 2 millennia. This was 2 millennia. Double the lifespan of Mesushelach. Came to the Shelach. And it grew into be a tree, but then they realized it was a male tree, which you could never know from the seed. You needed to grow to be able to see genetically if it's a male or a female. Which means a male tree, you know, males can't, the male tree couldn't produce the dates. A few years ago, they went and they found in the Judean deserts, you know where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Qumran caves. In that area, they found more seeds of dates. More seeds of a date tree. Date seeds. And they planted it in the Negev, in a kibbutz Ktura in southern Israel. And it was being cultivated under the intense heat of the south of Israel, the Negev. And then they decided to make a shidduch between Mesushelach and the female seeds. Female seeds also started to grow. It had to be pollinated. They took the pollen from Mesushelach and they put it on the female date tree, which they called Chana. So you have Mesushelach and you have Chana, and they became the biological parents of the dates that were harvested 2 weeks ago in Eretz Yisrael. And in the morning, the botanists and some guests came. They plucked the first dates. I saw the pictures. Nice, fresh. They looked delicious. I didn't taste them. And they made Baruch Atah Bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Borei Pri Eitz, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Shechiyanu V'Kimanu V'Giyanu Lizman Hazeh. And they ate these dates that are 2,000 years old, literally. They grew from seeds. These dates actually from the Judean deserts may even be more than 2,000 years old. Some said that it was 2,500 years old, and they came, it looked like they originated in Iraq. So some even wanted to say that Nehemiah and Ezra, Zerubbabel, they came from Bavel and they brought Te'enim, they brought Tmarim. It was those dates. Das kann ich nicht sagen, that I can't tell you. But we're talking about dates that go back perhaps before Bayis Sheni, At the time of Bayis Rishon, you're talking about those seeds that now grew into dates, and the Eidei Re'iyah said they were delicious, and they tasted like honey, because Dvash is Dvash Tmorim, and they made a Shechiyanu. Now, I found it very exciting. First of all, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing because it captures Jewish history. 2,500 years later, people looked at us and said, Tzion Sada Techarish. I remember the laugh. We all remember the laughing of Rabbi Akiva at the end of Makkos. Nichamtonu, Nichamtonu. Tzion Sada Techarish. Oy Yeshu Skenim, Skenis Berchovis Yerushalayim. You could say Shechiyanu v'kimonu v'gyanu l'zman hazeh. But I also see it as a metaphor for Knesset Yisrael. Sometimes you look at a Jew and you see a seed, and the seed seems dead and lifeless and numb and emaciated. No Ruach Chaim for 2,000 years is as gelegen on a neshama, on a guf, no trunk, no roots, nothing. An isolated, dead seed, and you look at it, what can become of it? Nothing. But take a look at what they did. They took such a seed from Eretz Yisrael before the Churban, and if you give it the right soil and the right water, Ein Mayim Ela Torah, and the right sunlight, photosynthesis, the warmth and the heat and the passion of the sun, and the right earth, you have to have humility, v'nafshi kafala kaltia, and the right avir, the right ear. You need soil, and you need air, and you need sunlight, and you need water. And what happens? Tchiyas HaMesa. Atzamas HaYeveshes, as Yecheskel says, Torah of Shabbos Chol HaMoed Pesach. Atzamas HaYeveshes. The dry bones come back to life. It's a metaphor of our times. It's a metaphor of Eretz Yisrael today. It's a metaphor of the Geula Shleima B'meira B'yameinu. But it's also a metaphor for every Jew. You don't give up on a Jewish seed. The Gemara says in Tainis Daf Heyam Mid Beis, Yaakov Avinu loy meis mazaroi b'chayim afu b'chayim. The Gemara could have said Bonov b'chayim, Makish hu l'zaroi. The pasuk that you and your children are going to come back. The Gemara says mazaroi b'chayim afu b'chayim. The diuk is zaroi. Every yid is a zera Yisrael, zera Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And that seed, you could look at a seed. There's nothing here. No. Don't be fooled. Al tabet al mareyu adam yirelei naim v'Hashem yirelei v'levav. Plant the seed. Allow it to develop roots. Reconnect it to its roots and give it its sunlight, give it its water, give it its soil, give it its air. And scientific and heavenly miracles will happen. And you'll be able to look at these souls, at these Jews, and say, Ru'u gidulim shegidalnu. Shechiyanu v'kimanu v'gyanu l'zman hazeh. Never ever give up on a child. Never ever give up on a friend's child. Never ever give up on a loved one. Never ever give up on yourself. And never ever give up on any Jew in the world. You have to realize that every neshama is a chelik eloka mimal mamash. It's a piece of infinity. It's a fragment of the divine. It's a piece of heaven. And even if its spiritual depth remains dormant and latent, and even it remains asleep and unconscious, it's hidden, it's asleep, it's relegated to the subconscious layers of their psyche. But Chalila, to think that it's gone, that it's obsolete, that cannot happen. Elamai, you need to have the approach. You need to be able to try again. You have to be able to tune in. You have to be able to transcend judgmentalism and insecurity and pettiness and fear. And you also have to be able to transcend religious arrogance and this attitude of holier than thou and this easiness to dismiss people who make us uncomfortable. You have to be able to see the bonim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem ahafti eschem amar Hashem bein kach ubein kach atem kruyim bonim kedushin lamed vav halachic Reb Meir, as the Rashba says. You have to be able to see lachlifam b'uma acheres ieni yachal, as the Rebbeinu Shalom is quoted in the Medrash. You have to be able to see it. And when you can see that, you could believe in them. They'll be able to believe in themselves. and they'll be able to be restored to their pristine, innate, extraordinary holiness. Gewaldige word from the Megala Amukas. The Heilige Megala Amukas, Reb Nosson Shapiro from Krakow, who passed away in the year 1640, the year Tov, and it says on his Matzeva that he was Zoiche that Eliyahu Hanavi revealed himself to him to teach him Torah. Now you know what it says on Amatzeva is not simple, because a person is held accountable for what it says on Amatzeva. That's why you have to be careful not to write Guzmayas, not to exaggerate on Amatzeva. So Maisa once in Hamil, in Gomel in Russia, the Rav was Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halevi of Hamil. And there was a levaya of a yid, and they put up a matzeva, and he went and he chopped off words from the matzeva, and he came to the base medrash. He said, "Alechaim," he says, "Ich hab heint getan ayidin's neshama atayva." You have to be careful. The Megala Amukas' matzeva says that Eliyahu Hanavi revealed himself to him. Megala Amukas has a moed dikavard. We know it's one of the pilei ployim of Rosh Hashanah. Tosfos brings from the Sefer HaAruch in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, the end of Lamed Gimel, Lamed Dal, the end of Masechta Rosh Hashanah, the minig to blow meya kailas. The minig on Rosh Hashanah is to blow 100 sounds, 100 kailas, and that's what we do. Some do it more, but meya kailas we do. Why? Keneged meya pi'iyos of Aim Sisra. We know that the pasuk says Yom Trua Yilachem. What's Trua? So the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, at the end of Rosh Hashanah, the Targum translates Trua as Yevava. What's Yevava? What's Yevava? So we have in Shoftim Perikei Vatiyavev Aim Sisra. Sisera was the arch enemy of the Jewish people. He went to war. Dvoira and Barak ben Avinoam fought Sisera, and Sisera was the greatest enemy of the Jewish people and a mighty, muscular, extraordinary, powerful figure. But we know how Dvoira and Barak defeated Sisera and his army in Nachal Kishoin in this story in the Navi in Sefer Shoftim. And the pasuk says there at the end, "Vatiyaviv Aim Sisera." The mother of Sisera moaned. She groaned, "Where's my son?" Her lady friends comforted her. They gave her futile solace. "Don't worry, he's collecting all the booty of the defeated Jews. He's going to come back, Neshayach Tzazagan, with infinite richness." But a mother's heart knows. And Sisera's mother knew that this was not the case. We know what happened. Sisera ran away on foot, and he entered into the tent of Yael, and Yael gave him milk to drink, and she put him to sleep, and she ultimately took the hammer and the peg, and she etched it into his forehead, and Sisera was slain, and the Jewish people were rescued and saved. So Sisera cried, Yevava. That's how we know what Yevava is. So we learn what Kiyas Shofar is from the mother of Sisera crying for his son. Strange, Rabbi, say or not? And the Gemara has a whole pilpul. What's a Yevava? Ginuche ganich yulul. Is it a groan? Is it a sob? Is it oi, 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 shvarim? Or is it trua? And of course, as good Jews, we want the cake and we want to eat it too. So what do? We do shvarim, we do trua, and maybe it's both. So we do shvarim, trua, and we're covered. So Tosfos says we do 100 kailas because Sisera's mother cried 100 times. Wie kommt es zu Rosh Hashanah? Might Kiyas Shofar, your Kiyas Shofar, Kiyas Shofar of Knesset Yisrael for thousands of years is Lekava, the mother of Sisera. How do we explain this? It's a hafla dika megala amukas. It's deep and intense and intricate. We have only a few moments left, so I'm just going to say a nekuda bekitzer achi nimritz. The Gemara tells us in Maseches Nazir, G'doyla aveir l'shma mitzvah shaloi l'shma. The Gemara speaks over there about the fact that Sheva be'ilois ba'ala oisei Rosh. When you look at the psukim of Sisera running into the tent of Yael, it says the word shachav, kara shachav, 7 times. The way Yael managed to get Sisera so exhausted, he was a mighty man, was by having relations with him 7 times. Ultimately, he falls asleep, and ultimately, she can kill him. And this is what she did in order to save Klal Yisrael from this arch evil enemy, Sisera. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Tzadik Vav in the K'tukei Sofrim, Mibnei Bonov Shel Sisera Lamdu Torah B'Bnei Brak, Umanu Rebbe Akiva. Rebbe Akiva came from Sisera. So the Megala Amukas explains, and he goes through the psukim and shows how it's all indicated in the psukim. It's a hafladik Megala Amukas, we'll have to do it in another shiur. How this happened from that day or night when Yael was together with Sisera. Sisera impregnated Yael, and this was ultimately the seed that after many generations produced Rabbi Akiva, who was a Ben Gadim. He came from non-Jews, he came from Sisera. His Elta Zayda was Sisera with Yael, and this was the neshama of Rabbi Akiva. Wow. And the Meghallah Amukah says that the mother, every mother in Tanakh is a metaphor for the Shechina. Every mother in Tanakh. Because our mother, Eim Habonim Smecha, the mama, Shchinta Begalusa, Rachel Mevaka Al Boneha. Every mother is rooted in the ultimate mother, the mother of creation. The Shechina, which is Lashon Nekeva, is Kutchabrichu Lashon Zachar, Shchinte Lashon Nekeva, Shem Yichud Kutchabrichu Shchinte, the masculine and the feminine, Soiviv Kalalman and Mamala Kalalman. So B'meil explained, Nefesh HaChaim explained, and Tanya, a lot of Sfarim. So what happens, says the Megala Mukas, the Shechina is crying, Oi, did Sisera die before bringing into the world the seed of Rabbi Akiva's neshama? Because the Shechina knows, and the mother of Sisera has an unconscious awareness that the seed of Rabbi Akiva is in Sisera. Was he killed prematurely before he passed on that seed? That was the Yevava. Of course, that did not happen because Yael got the seed of Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva came to the world, and Kulu Alibad Rabbi Akiva, the whole Torah Shebapeh that we have today, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, comes from Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva is the person who is responsible for the Messiah of Torah Shebapeh after the Churban, when it seemed like Tishtakech Torah mi Yisrael, Ad Hayom Hazeh Kulu Alibad Rabbi Akiva. Every shir in Gemara, every shir in Medrash, every shir in Torah Shebapeh is based on Rabbi Akiva and the 5 students that he created, as the Gemara says in Yevamah Samach Beis. So when we're blowing 100 kailas of shofar, or when we're blowing 130 kailas of shofar, we're not just blowing sounds of a shofar. Every one of those kailas is dedicated to a nitzutz, to a Yiddish neshama, and this neshama may be trapped in a body that looks like Sisera, who's a Rasha, but that sister may be carrying the seed of Rabbi Akiva, and as we're blowing shofar, we want to rescue, and we want to identify, and we want to embrace, and we want to open ourselves up, and we want to wake up and trigger and stir and stimulate that isolated neshama who may externally seem like he's trapped in Sisera, but really there may be a Rabbi Akiva who can be lost to the Jewish people. And that's the Yevava, that's the tears of every single Jewish mother, and of every single Jewish father, and of every single Jew who blows 100 kailas keneged the Meya Yevavis of Sisera. Is it possible that there's a Yiddish nitzutz that's trapped in a Sisera, but it's really a nitzutz of Rabbi Akiva, or the ilk of Rabbi Akiva? And it may never come back to us, because we may kill it and we may get rid of it before we had a chance to redeem it and to rescue it from the imke haklipis. My dearest friends, Tayyid Yidden, I'm going to conclude with a story. This is an incredible, incredible story. I love this story. It's so telling, it's so beautiful, it's so Jewish. This story was shared years ago on BBC. Probably one of the most powerful stories ever shared on BBC by a British Jew whose name was Beryl Gartner. And Beryl Gartner shared this story on BBC. It was a story about himself. During the 8 months before the Second World War broke out, 1938, 1939, there was a kinder transport from Germany and other Nazi-occupied countries that came to Britain, to England. 10,000 Jewish kids were saved. Ultimately, it was interrupted when the war broke out. Yud Zayin Elul Tov Reish Tzadik Tes, 1939, just a few days before Rosh Hashanah, September 1, 1939. Beryl Gartner was one of the children who had to bid farewell to his parents and siblings. He was 11 years old or 12 years old, and he was sent on a kinder transport to England. The kids were placed in orphanages. And many of these children, I think most of these children, were the sole survivors of their families, because their entire families were wiped out by Hitler and Machshama. Beryl was in an orphanage with other Jewish children, but he did not stop crying. He begged those who took care of him in the orphanage to please unite him with the parents. They tried to help him in any way possible, to buy him toys and to appease him and to reward him and to try to distract him to no avail. Beryl could not come back to himself, grieving and mourning for his beloved parents who were not with him any longer. Okay, versteh, go understand what these Jews went through. One day, King George VI was going through the village, going through the town. He would, those years, inspect the kinder transports and different refugees who came to England to see the work that England did to save all these kids. King George VI was the monarch, the king who ruled the British Commonwealth from 1936 until his death in 1952. And the heads of the orphanage told the Jewish children, including Beryl, that King George is coming. And when Beryl heard that, he calmed down. He stopped crying. It was strange. He heard that the king is traveling through the village and they could see him, and he stopped crying. He had a secret. The day when King George passed, in the royal carriage with the royal entourage, all the children were brought out of the orphanages and they lined up to watch the king and salute the king during this parade and sing to the king and extol the king and praise the king, King George VI. And there were, of course, barricades blocking all the visitors and all the youth and all the children who were watching the king. And as the royal carriage came by and it passed the place where Beryl was standing, in all of his might, he broke through the barricades and he ran to the carriage. Nothing would stop him. Of course, the royal guards immediately would not allow this to happen. They grabbed him and they schlepped him back to the barricades. But the king noticed this commotion because all these guards jumped this kid. You know what it was he want to do? Does he want to assassinate the king? Want to hurt the king? So the king noticed this commotion and he turned to one of his bodyguards and he asked him, what happened? So they told this king that this kid was trying to jump the royal carriage. So the king said, let me see him. And they brought him to the king. And the king said, why were you running to the carriage? Is there something you want to tell me or ask me? He says, yeah. But he doesn't speak. He starts crying. He starts crying. The king says, what's wrong? He says, I miss my parents. I was brought here from Germany, and I miss my parents. I don't want to be separated from my father and my mother. Please, bring my parents here so I could be with them. And the king, with eyes of compassion, looks at him and says, my son, we are now at war with Germany. There's no way I can bring your parents. And he looked at the king with the eyes of a 12-year-old and he said, but you're the king of England. You can do anything. I'm sure you could find a way to bring my parents to me. And he burst out sobbing again. And the king said, give me the name of your parents. Stop crying. Let me see what I can do. He bid farewell to the king, not knowing what to expect. A few months later, there was a knock on the door of his orphanage. Beryl Gartner's parents were brought out of Germany, reunited in London with their son Beryl. The Balatanya says that in the days and weeks leading up to Rosh Hashanah, the Melech is Basada. Not King George, the Melech Malchei HaMelachim also goes out to the villages, also goes out to the fields, also goes out, I don't know if you could see here our forests here, also comes out. He leaves the palace. He meets you on your terms. He wants to come to your home, to your village, to your office, to your quarantine, to your heart, to your space, to connect with you. But so many of us are behind barricades. We feel that we cannot approach the king. There are too many barricades. My heart is locked up. It's not just I am on lockdown. My heart is on lockdown. How can I approach the king? There's no relationship. There's only cynicism and apathy and depression and sadness and trauma. There are so many barricades. And sometimes the barricades come from without. It's maybe our thoughts or maybe our actions in the past. Avoneseichem avdilim. There's barricades. I can't approach them. Or maybe it's barricades that were imposed by others. And maybe it's our Jewish girls and women who are stuck behind enemy lines and they're behind barricades. This Elul and this Rosh Hashanah, I say to you, my dearest brothers and my dearest sisters, jump the barricades. Leap over the barricades. Vernish Nespal. Don't get distracted. Remember the fourth of V'chein of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is what? Avud Raham says what? Uv'chein avay al hamelech asher lo chados. The fourth Uv'chein of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is Uv'chein avay al hamelech asher lo chados. I'm going to come to the king even if the law says I can't, because there are barricades. The Shalom and the Rishos Chacham say Acher never did Shuvah Chagiga Daf Tesvav. Why? You're a baskel. Shuvah bonam shoivavim chutz me'acher. It's a mistake. The Gemara says, Kol ma shebalabais oimel lecha aseh chutz mitzeh. Whatever the balabais tells you to do, you do, unless he tells you leave. If he tells you leave, you don't do that. You don't have to leave the house. You want me to take off my shoes, I'll take off my shoes. You want me to be quiet, I'll be quiet. You want me to speak at your table, I'll speak. You want me to sing a song, I'll sing a song. But you tell me leave, I don't have to leave. The Rebbeinu Shalom tells you what to do, you do it. Besides when he says say. When he says leave, I'm not interested in you, you don't have to listen. Chutz mitzeh. Ubechein avei el hamelech asher lo chados. You can jump the barricade. Forget about the barricades in your heart. Jump the barricades. Get onto the carriage and speak to the king heart to heart and face to face. Tell him everything that's on your mind. Tell him everything that's on your heart. Connect in the deepest and most intimate way. Be raw, be open, be vulnerable. And extraordinary things can happen. Allow God to invest in you. Open yourself up to his imagination of what you're capable of, so that you and all of us can have and experience the most awesome, powerful, blessed, healthy, prosperous, happy, and joyous year. Shana Tova M'sukkah, Aksiva V'Achsima Tova, Ashnas Geula V'Yeshua, Amen Ken Yehi Ratzon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobson. And this is not the end of Rabbi Jacobson tonight.
I hope it's not the end of Rabbi Jacobson. If it is, well, I'll go to Yad La'achim.
We don't give up an aid, and even a single Jew, even a guy like you, we don't give up.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. Tell my mother-in-law.
So the Gunish Helfen, as they say. It's really, really tremendous cost that, we had a vision to speak an inspirational word. And again, for those that are just joining, or we would definitely have him after as well, we'll be able to go to our website, to yadevent.com. You can see the video. Tell your friends about it. We'll have it uploaded. Now, just for the schedule, I'm going to show you in a few seconds a video of a woman. Her name is Michal, and it's just a short clip of her telling her story. It was initially done in Hebrew, and it was dubbed over in English to be able to understand it. Obviously, many people speak Hebrew, obviously, but just so for the whole world, they dubbed it over in English, and we'll hear it tell her.
My mother knew that her mother was Jewish all along, but she simply hid it from us because she thought that since by Muslims it goes by the father, I don't even have to know about it.
הגעתי לדירה בת חדר, ומיכל ישבה על המיטה, בוכה, עצובה, שני הילדים לידה, מלאי עצב.
I would go to my mother and show her all the bruises he did to me, all the marks he left on me. I would say to her, look what a beast, look what he does to me. She would say, shh. To others, we disclose nothing. We are women. We're supposed to fulfill our husband's will. What our husband says, we do, and we don't tell anyone that he beats us. It's because we weren't good. We did something wrong, that's why we got beaten. That's what she said to me. I was in shock. My mother thinks like that. I told him I want a divorce. The very day I told him I want a divorce, he took a knife and made bruises all over me and told me, the day you divorce me is the day you'll die. A woman doesn't divorce her husband. I wasn't afraid. Nothing scared me. Not even death. I even didn't care if I die, as long as my children would grow up in Jewish surroundings. We called Yad L'Achim. It was a moment I couldn't believe. I said, what? They would help me? How? What help? I don't believe in anything. I didn't believe anything anymore. I had nothing. 2 months, I didn't see my children. He didn't even let me call them, see them, their pictures, nothing. Except for 2 garments I'd left in my closet. Every night, I'd hug those clothes, smell them, and fall asleep with their scent. That's all I had. Every child I saw outside playing, at the age of my children, I would run and hug them and cry. I would say, where are my children? What are they doing? I didn't know a thing. I didn't know where my children were, what was being done with them. That even their voices, even the first word my son said, I didn't hear.
אנחנו שומעים שיעולים. מחנך עשה לי, אמרת לי, זה הוא, זה הוא, זה הוא. אז אמרתי לה, מה, מאיפה את בזה? יש 2 שיעולים של בן אדם, כאילו, זהו. לא עבר דקה, קצין חקירות הגיע, אמרתי, תשמעי, עצרנו אותו. היא פשוט התחילה לרקוד בחדר משמחה, והיא אמרה לי, אני מרגישה עכשיו ציפור דרור, שיצאה מאפלה לאורה. והתחילה לקרוא שמע ישראל, והכל היה כל כך מרגש וכל כך, לראות ילדה כל כך קטנה, פתאום את הרגעי השחרור הגדולים האלה, זה היה פשוט מדהים.
מדובר באירוע מאוד מאוד מורכב, מבצע של ילדים שנותקו מאמא שלהם בארץ מוסלמית, נשארו מעבר לקווי האויב. כשאתה עושה מבצע כזה, אתה יודע שאתה לא מוציא רק את הילדים האלה. אתה מוציא גם אותם וגם את הדורות הבאים אחריהם, ואולי זו הדרך היחידה שלהם לחזור לחיק היהדות. הגענו למצבים שבאמת הלב שלך מפסיק לפעום, ואתה אומר, בונה, איך הדבר הזה קרה? והצלחנו עם זה.
I can't describe the feeling that you see your children after half a year. It was the most amazing feeling I experienced. The feeling that my soul returned to my body. I was complete. I told him the story and said, listen, my friend endured such and such stuff. And he said, wow, what a woman, how strong. So I said to him, if that woman was me, what would he say about me?
הרי את מקודשת לי בטבעת זו כדת משה וישראל. מקודשת, מקודשת, מקודשת. שמע ישראל אדוני
Hold him down, you gotta hold him down. And she holds him down, and the poor kid is screaming, and at that moment, mommy is literally disobeying and betraying the trust and the yearnings and the tears of this child. But mommy knows that this child needs to get this blood test. But something interesting happens. The needle is over, and who does the child go to for comfort? The child goes to mommy for comfort. Why are you going to mommy? She's the one who's guilty. She's the one who forced you into the doctor's office. Because the child may not understand why. The child may not at this point have a grasp. The child doesn't know. But the child knows that this is my mother and I can trust her. And therefore, even though she did it, I come back to her for a hug and for an embrace. And I find this very reflective, often, of our relationship with Hashem. Life is mysterious. Ata Yedeya Raza Yolam. Reb Moshe Leib Sosov has said, the secrets of Torah, there are some Jews who know. But the Raza Yolam, the secrets of the world, Ata Yedeya. Only you know the secrets of the world. The journeys of life are so unfathomable and often so mysterious. It says in Pirkei Avos, Ein biyadeinu lo mishalvus harishayim v'lo miyisuri hatzadikim. In our hands, in our brains, we don't have the answers to the serenity of the Rasha and to the suffering of the tzaddik. We just don't, after all the explanations in the world. And I know that I have colleagues and rabbis who give explanations for everything, and they rationalize and they justify, and whatever. I think that ultimately we don't know most of these things, or at least a lot we don't know. And even that which we think we know, there's much more that we don't know. And we have to be able to have that appreciation that we're dealing with infinity, and there's no way that a finite brain can grasp infinity. But what I do know, and what I really want to cultivate within myself, is the absolute conviction that the Ribbono Shel Olam conceived you in love. He created you in love. He loves you infinitely, and as the Baal Shem Tov said, Hashem's love to every Jew is infinitely greater than the love of parents to an only child who was born when they were already older. And even that doesn't grasp, doesn't capture the profundity of the Ava of Hashem to every Jew. The last Navi that we had was the Navi Malachi, who was in the beginning of Bayesheni. And what's his final message? He tells the Jewish people, Ahavti eschem amar Hashem. And the Jews ask. He says, the Jews are going to say, B'me'aftanu, you love me? Come on, look at me. First of all, I'm not worthy of love. And second of all, you put me through all this trouble. Haloi ach Esav liYaakov. The Ribbono Shel Olam says, V'oyeves Yaakov. Ahavti eschem. And every morning we say, Me'avoscha sha'ahavto Yisrael. And then we say, Avas Oilam Aftanu. The Chazal made sure to put this as a bracha before Krishma, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, Avas Oilam Aftanu. And if you're a good Ashkenaz Nusach, Avarabba, he's even greater than Avas Oilam. And in that bracha, Avas Oilam, we mentioned the verb love 7 times. And it's not enough to say in the beginning, Avas Oilam, we finish off, Haboicher Ba'ama Yisrael Ba'ava. And then you could be Mekabel El Malchus Shemaim, you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Because if you don't have this prerequisite, that Hashem really is crazy about you, Kevayachal, and He loves you to pieces, and He loves you infinitely, and the love is unconditional, more than a parent to a child, then it's very difficult for me to be able to say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha B'chol levavcha B'chol nafshecha B'chol ma'idech. So even when we're going through difficulties in life, and we don't understand why, and we don't always have to understand why, it's important to spend time and meditate in calmness and serenity on the truth that Hashem loves you. And I want to share something with you, If you were never loved in your life, you probably don't know what it feels like to be loved. It's a very, very deep feeling, and unfortunately, many people don't know what it is. And I'm going to ask you this question honestly, my dear friends. Do you know what the experience of feeling loved is? I don't mean intellectually. Oh yeah, I love you, I love you. I'm not talking from a cerebral space. I'm talking about from a body, physical, experiential place that you could mamish Feel it. Do you know what that experience is? Some of us don't. We never had it. Maybe we had the opposite. David HaMelech says, Ki avi v'imi azavuni v'Hashem yasfeini. As an adult, you have to be able to cultivate it and learn how to acquire it. Allow yourself to open yourself up to Hashem's love. You have to open yourself up to it. And you have to speak to the trauma in you, because the trauma inside of you says, no, you're not lovable. Nobody's ever going to love you. So this is a real mental avodah. This is avodah. This is real avodas Hashem. And trust and rest assured, this is avodas Hashem. This is maybe the essence of avodas Hashem. To be able to open yourself up emotionally and experientially to feel God's love to you.
Here's a question that's really appropriate for this year. A lot of people are saying they're stuck at home, quarantined. What should they be doing Rosh Hashanah? They're stuck. Somebody can't even get a room. They don't have someone else. So many people are not going to shul. They're stuck at home for the first time. They don't know what to do. What suggestion you give the people are stuck at home this Rosh Hashanah?
Great question. And the answer I'm going to give you is a mashal from the Baal Shem Tov. It's a beautiful mashal, and it's so apropos this year. The Halakha Baal Shem Tov said, it's based on a medrash, the king of the jungle is the lion, and the lion was once angry at all the animals, and they were all threatened by him and intimidated, and they were frightened that he's going to destroy them all. So they had a conference, and the fox, the shrewd and sly fox, told them, don't worry, let's go to the king, and I have, in my repertoire, I have 300 beautiful stories and anecdotes and jokes that the king, the lion, is going to love, and that way we will be able to placate him and appease him, and everything will be fine. Great. So all of the animals begin this parade, this procession, to the Melech Shebechayis, Aryeh Shah Gmila Yira, and on the way, the fox turns to Reb Wolf. There was an alte Chaya there, Reb Zev Wolf, and he says, Reb Wolf, I forgot 100 of my stories. Reb Wolf says, don't worry, you still have 200. Fine. They move on, they're getting already closer to the king. He turns to the Bedel, Reb Doiv, and he says, Bedel, I forgot another 100 stories. He says, okay, Nishke Ferlich, you still have 100. It's enough to entertain the lion, the king. They are already approaching the den of the lion. They're approaching his territory. He rises up, he's erect. He gives the roar, Aryeh Shag, Milo Yira, as the Navi says. And what happens? The fox turns to the Tzvi Hirsch, to the deer, to the gazelle, and he says, Reb Tzvi, Reb Hirschele, you won't believe it, I forgot the last 100 stories. Oy, oy, oy. Their whole hope was the fox with his stories, with his entertaining anecdotes and metaphors and parables and toidelach and vertlach. He's broke. There's nothing there. And the lion is standing and waiting. He's angry and furious. And they all come around the fox. They say, well, what should we do? What should we do? The Baal Shem Tov says the fox looked at them and said, don't you realize I did my job? My job was to get you out of your comfort zone, to get you out of your fear, and to bring you to the king. Now, it's up to you. Let every single one of you go on your own and speak to the king face to face, heart to heart, and make peace with him. So the Baal Shem Tov said, comes Yamim Noirayim, and we hire Chazonim, and Bali Tfilah, and Rabbonim, and Magidim, and Mashgichim, and Bali Musar, and speakers, and teachers. We hire them all to inspire them, and to sing for us, and to daven for us, and to speak Dvorim HaYotzim and Halev, and to be Mo'eres Halev. And the Baal Shem Tov says, they're like the hired fox. We bring in the fox, he knows all the stories, he knows all the tefillas, he knows all the nigunim, he knows all the songs, and he's going to do it for us, and we're going to listen, and we'll sing along once in a while, or read the pamphlet on the table. And he says, at some point, the fox turns to us and says, I got nothing. My job was just to get you into the territory. But now, it's all about you. And the Baal Shem Tov says, Shaloi lismach al hachazonim al harabbonim. Not to rely on the chazonim and on the rabbis. How apropos this year. You know what you should do this Rosh Hashanah? It's like the fox said. I got all the stories, but now I got nothing. Now it's you. It's you. This Rosh Hashanah, I say to you, make it the most memorable, meaningful, powerful, and inspiring Rosh Hashanah of your life. I know our flow has been interrupted. What we're all accustomed to and we all cherish for many years has been interrupted. But let's also be honest. How memorable was your last Rosh Hashanah and 2 Rosh Hashanahs ago? Sometimes people are bored in shul. Yeah? This Rosh Hashanah, make it real. Make it authentic. No fanfare, no drama. Nobody was watching you, no pressure, no time, no chazan going too fast, too slow, singing too loud, too low, singing the songs you like, too much chazanas. Gargultzich, he wants to hear himself. You know the Maisa, it's a great one. There was once a chazan in a shul in New Jersey, Rosh Hashanah, and he davened for long, he didn't stop. And when he finished, the president comes over to him and says, "You will never be hired again in this place." The chazan comes home depressed. His wife says, "What's the matter? Make kiddush." He says, "I'm fasting." She says, "You're fasting? I know you for 40 years. You don't fast. Tell me what's going on." He says, "I'm not in the mood of eating." She says, "Why not?" He says, "The president told me that he's never ever going to invite me again because my chazanas was horrible." You know, a wise woman, an Eshes Chayil, knows what to say to her husband. She says to him, "Oh, that president, what does he know? He's an idiot. He just repeats what the whole shul says." So the bottom line is, instead of, the chazan did well, the chazan didn't do well, the Rav gave a good Russia, not a good Russia, I liked it, I didn't like it, whatever. Now it's a Rosh Hashanah of intimacy. It's a Rosh Hashanah of Yisrael U'Malka B'Chedai. It's a Rosh Hashanah of Chana. The Haftarah of Rosh Hashanah is, Chana goes into the Mishkan herself. Eli thinks she's drunk. Chana is communicating with the Rebbeinu Shalom, heart to heart. Ve'eshpoich es nafshi lefnei Hashem. As Yirmiyah says, Shivchi chamayim libech noichech pnei Hashem, right? Shivchi chamayim chamam. That's what Rosh Hashanah should be. It should be a Rosh Hashanah in which you coronate the Rebbeinu Shalom as your Melech. What does it mean to coronate the Rebbeinu Shalom as your Melech? It means to realize that the king inside of you is your Chelek Elekam Imal, which means your infinite core is your Melech. You're not ruled by your addictions, by your fears, by your insecurities, by your traumas, by your envy, by your hatred, by your resentments, by your narcissism, by all of your mental disorders or personality issues or challenges or shortcomings or flaws. You know who's ruling your life? Ruling in you is the infinite source of existence that lives in you. V'shachanti b'soicham. Who's the ruler in my life? Ki amalchus shalchahi. That's Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is Kabbalas HaMalchus. Realize that Rosh Hashanah is the time that we basically become, it's the deepest achdus. It's the deepest achdus of Ein Melech B'Lo. Hashem begs every Jew, Shetamlichuni Aleichem, I want a relationship with you. I want you to coronate me. And the fact that you're in the privacy of your home, do not see it at all as a diminished Rosh Hashanah. I say, conversely, make it the most powerful, meaningful, intimate, authentic, raw, and transformative Rosh Hashanah in your life.
I'm going to combine two questions. So I'm getting about children. First, the super question is privately, right? If it's still a one and out and the left, yes, still a few left, go to help.org. And people say, there's no minimum.
Could you shut one of them? It's hard to hear. Yes.
So the two questions that we're having for people is this. How do we instill a loving geschmack in Yiddishkeit for our children? Today it's so hard with kids that they don't feel connected. We ourselves don't feel connected, some other people ask. So I guess I'll combine two or three ways. How do we feel connected? How do we get our children to be connected? And the technical question is, how do you feel in shul? Should a father decide, hey, or a mother, to give up their own diving to help their children, and how much they focus on themselves, the kids? I guess you know this topic enough, so let's hear what you have to say. It's good.
In terms of Yiddishkeit, I think, this is such a big topic and a big sugya, and so much is being discussed about this now. So I'm just going to make a few, brief and points that I hope could be relevant and meaningful. And that is, I find that the deepest way to inspire your children is by really, really serving as a true role model. In other words, if I'm inspired by Yiddishkeit, my children will see my simchas achayim, they'll see my midas tovus, they'll see my emunah, they'll see my menuchas hanefesh, they'll see my discipline, they'll see my truthfulness, my integrity. And it's going to touch them, it's going to affect them. Of course, we have a mitzvah of chinuch, and we want to educate our children and mold our children and discipline our children in a healthy and loving way, and create structures in the home that are wonderful and are productive and are positive. But the most important thing is, ultimately, my kids are going to get older. And they're going to have to make their own decisions. I'm not going to be able to control them forever. There's a beautiful Rashi in Parshas Ba'aloischa. Shetehei shalheves oila me'eleha. Ba'aloischa, not ba'hadlikcha. Don't light the candle. You have to put the match there and make sure that the shalheves is oila me'eleha. It burns on its own, so that even when the match is not there, it's still going to burn. Sometimes it's burning because the match is there. So yeah, you know, when my child is at home, I say what to do. Do this, do this, do this, do this, and perhaps I can get my child to listen. And today, once they're older, even that is not so simple. But you know what your real goal is? Shetei shalheves oila me'eleha. You want that Yiddishkeit should be transferred to your child from a place of pnimius. In other words, if it's really emes, if it touches me, so then the way I speak to my children about it is b'bchines bakshu panai ve'eshpeches nafshi. It's real. It's emes. And there's no substitute for that. I could play the game, I can fake it, but ultimately children feel my truth. They feel not only your conscious, but your subconscious. So that's why the deepest way of chinuch is to work on yourself, to become the person that you're capable of becoming. Confront your stuff, confront your skeletons, confront your anxiety, confront your toxicity. Today, the big avodah is within yourself. Cleanse yourself. Develop a consciousness of geula. Develop a consciousness of infinity. Develop a consciousness of dveikus in a real way. And some of us need help with this. It's not so simple. But we could get it. Make sure your shalom bayis is beautiful and sterling. Make sure your Shabbos table is a lichtike Shabbos table. And it doesn't mean that you have to follow all the rules, you know, say the Dvar Torah. You could say jokes, you know. You could ask riddles. You could play interesting games. But bond with your children. That's the second thing. It's so important to emotionally bond with our kids, to understand them, to spend time with them, to be there with them when they're young. Because you want that when they're teenagers, they should be able to trust you. They should be able to know that Tati is the guy I could speak to. Mommy is the guy that I could speak to. Discipline is important, but the discipline should not be from anger. It should be from love. In terms of davening yourself and davening with your children, listen, as parents, we dedicate time to help our children daven. And that's part of your davening. Part of your relationship with Hashem is, what does Hashem say about Avram Avinu? Ki yedaitiv lamana sheyitzava es bonav es beisev v'shamru derech Hashem lasas tako mishpat. Don't feel that the time you're spending with your children and davening and learning is taking away from your davening and learning. That's your ultimate davening and learning. Your ultimate davening and learning is that you're connecting other people. Laman asher yitzave es bonav es beisa. You know, but yitzave means command, but yitzave is from the lashon tzavsa v'chibur. Yitzave means connect. Mitzvah is a connection. Laman asher yitzave es bonav es, he connects his children. So when you connect your children, that's an essential part of your avodas Hashem. But that doesn't mean screaming at your children to daven instead of you davening. It means inspiring your children, davening with your children, singing with your children, connecting with your children.
People, as Thursday May Tshuva is coming up, everyone wants to know, Rabbi YY, please tell us what we should be working on for the next few days. What do you feel we should be working on? What's your first take upon this?
It's a wonderful question. What I would say is, I would say two things. First of all, this is a very special time because the whole world is going through a cheshbon hanefesh, and we're going through a cheshbon hanefesh, but the whole world is going through a shtickle elul and a shtickle aseret simei tshuva. At least any person who's aware of what's happening, you know? Our public centers have been closed, and we are all quarantined in one way or another, and literally the whole world. It's amazing, right? I have a sister-in-law in Australia, they can't leave their house, and I have a brother-in-law in South Africa, and he can't leave his house, and I have relatives in Israel, whatever. It's incredible. It's like everyone is in this quarantine. So it's a very special time now to reevaluate your life. I would say don't just take a Kabbalah for one thing. You know, I'm going to start doing this. That's great. It's a wonderful thing to take. But I think it's really an opportunity to really go into ourselves and ask the deeper, tougher questions, create paradigm shifts. And what I would say to you is, number one, ask yourself, what are you afraid most? What are you afraid of most? There's probably something that's really frightening you, that's really holding you back. And try to do tshuva in that. Try to confront that. Maybe it's having a conversation with somebody that you didn't have for many years. Try doing that. Maybe it's getting involved in something, in a project. Maybe it's making a call. Maybe it's jumping into something. Maybe it's dealing with a certain issue in your life that you're so afraid of. That's where it should begin. Confront it. Jump the barricade. Don't be afraid of that. That's number one. Number two, the next thing I would say is, there shouldn't be anybody in the world that you're not on speaking terms with. If there's somebody you're not on speaking terms with, because of yourself, is nishgut. I'm not talking about a case where, there's an abuser or a molester and you have to protect yourself or your kids. But if you're fighting with your brother, your sister, your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, your father, your mother, your zayda, your uncle, your aunt, your shuttif, your old shuttif, your future shuttif, your classmate, the guy in shul, whatever it is, your nephew, call them up. Even if you are right, don't hold on to machlokes. And again, I'm not talking about a situation where, you're taking somebody, they owe you a lot of money, you have a right to get back the money they owe you. And I'm not talking about a case of pikuach nefesh, where somebody is a danger to your life and you have to create boundaries. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about all these fights that we have, disagreements about Yerushas, about Savoyas, about our parents, about the business, about who took the business, who owns the business, and we don't show up at chasnas, we don't show up at bar mitzvahs. I can't speak to my sister, I can't speak to my niece ever again. Come on. After 2,000 years of galus, it's time to get out of our pettiness. Make the call. No text. Make the call or meet them face to face. Call them up and say, listen, I'm sorry. Let's make amends. We don't have to become best friends. But we could show up at each other's simchas. We could say good Shabbos to each other in shul. Our kids are allowed to talk to each other. I think everyone should do this. Everyone. I want you, this Yom Kippur, you come to shul and you say, God, there's not a single person in the world that I am not on speaking terms with. Again, they may not be on speaking terms with you, but there's not a person in the world. I'm not talking about terrorists. I'm not talking about the Osama bin Ladens of the world. Better not to be on speaking terms with them. But there's nobody in my whole orbit that I'm not on speaking terms, that I can't say good Shabbos, that I can't say good Yom Tov to them. I can't invite them to my son's bar mitzvah. There's no such a person in the world. That's the person I think you should aspire to become this year, Tafshin Pei Aleph.
Interesting question in regards to technology. A few people are texting that they mentioned that they feel they're. Do you hear me or what?
Yeah.
That they feel they're too addicted to their phones.
Oh.
They can't stop. They have it at night. What advice would you
Yeah.
give people to disconnect from the technology?
Okay.
Living in today's world.
So the question like this: if they're listening to my clips, then I can give a heter. Just joking. But it's a big problem. We are addicted. It's a disease. We have gaming addictions and we have screen addictions. And yes, we're always on WhatsApp and we're looking at clips. You're looking at Rabbi YY, then you're watching Reb Melech Biderman, then you go to Times of Israel, then you go a story about Trump and Bahrain, and then there's a picture with a Sefer Torah, and then there's a good clip about therapy, and then there's a good clip about chinuch, and then there's a good clip about global warming, and then there's a funny... It's not Dvarim Asurim, it's Dvarim Mutarim. And you know what? There's some good stuff there. There's some inspiration there. But this is not good. This is destroying generations, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, socially. And you gotta stop this. You have to stop this. The rule of thumb is like this. I would say, generally speaking, again, everyone has their own life, but I'm just giving general ideas. When you wake up in the morning, unless there's an emergency or something is urgent, your child is calling from Israel or they're calling from the doctor's office, you should not be dealing with your phone. You should not be dealing with your phone. Halachically, hashkafically, it's a time to say Moida Ani, it's a time to wash Negelwasser, it's a time to say Birchas HaShachar, it's a time to live, not to distract yourself with WhatsApps. There's davening, Kviyas Sitim L'Torah, And then afterwards, you take your phone. But even then, be disciplined. There's times you're having a shir, you're learning a Blat Gemara, you're learning a Perek Mishnayos, you're learning Parshas Shavua. Shut the phone. Shut the phone. A person has to have a few hours a day with no phone. And then comes lunch or dinner with the family. No phone. Don't put it on vibrate. And don't even put it on off in your pocket. You put it in your drawer. If you're going to work these days, you come home 5 o'clock, from 5 to 9. There's no phones. There's no phones. Speak to your wife. Speak to your husband. Speak to your children. I went the other day, I was at a school, and I'm watching a mother. It was so sad. I told my wife, I'm watching a mother walking home with 2 children, a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. You know, it's such a beautiful, innocent time. And they're walking, holding the hands of their mother, walking home from school. They live close to the school. It's such an unbelievable time to see, to gauge the emotions of your children, to bond with them, to giggle with them. But what was she doing? She was violently texting on the phone. Now, she wasn't doing bad things. She was probably doing an Amazon order for Rosh Hashanah. We know what mothers do on phones. I trust them much more than the men on the phones. She wasn't doing, she was probably doing something that she needs for the household. My point is that it's not coming from bad intentions. And still, very often, we just end up becoming consumed by it. And we don't own our phones. Our phones own us. They are the balabatim. They own us. They own us on every single level. And as a result of that, we are dealing with a situation that is sad and tragic. And never mind teenagers. Oh my God, teenagers! You give them those phones and they're on it for 9 hours a day, especially now in the Zoom era. 9 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. And this is even if there's good filters and it's Dvarim HaMutarim and it's innocent stuff. Even then, the addiction to screens and the addiction to games and the addictions to technology, it dulls people's lives. I use it, we all use it. You use it for your businesses, you use it for fundraising. Yad La'achim uses it, Rabbi YY uses it, all my shiurim use technology. We use it, we appreciate it. But we have to know that if you're not disciplined with it, for a few hours a day, it's out of your life. People go to bed with it, they wake up with it. It's mamash. Lahavdil. That's pshat in the pasuk. V'dibarta bam, v'dibarta b'WhatsApp, b'shiftecha b'veisecha, b'lechtecha b'derech, b'shachbecha, b'kumecha, u'kshartem lo'is al yadecha. It's in my hands. V'hoyu l'taytofes b'neinecha. It's on my eyes. U'chsaftem al mezuzas b'secha v'sharecha. Wherever I go, in my home and my office. But the Torah doesn't say it about the iPhones. The Torah says it about Krishma. The Torah says it about Talmud Torah. We have to take control of this. And you know what? It dulls people. It dulls people. I know people, Shabbos and Yom Tov, they have, phantom pain. They hear vibrations of their phone a whole Shabbos because they're so accustomed to it. And I should also add, the second special thing they have to be careful is Dvarim HaSurim, which means pornography, TikTok, and all of these types of things that youngsters are getting on their phones and on their tablets. And it makes them addicted to the worst of the worst, and it ruins their marriages. I deal with this all day, and parents are afraid to say anything to their children. You want to be your children's best friend. You don't have to be your children's best friend. You want to be the one who really cares for your children. And if you can't make limits on those phones, and you cannot cleanse them with filters, and you cannot shut them down when you have to shut them down, you're making a big mistake. Because our kids are beautiful kids, but you can't expect a 14-year-old who has social anxiety and maybe has a little ADD and is having a hard time in yeshiva. Ma'yasa haben v'lo yechta. 4 o'clock in the morning, he's going to be watching filthy stuff, and it's not his fault. And we have to take the responsibility to mix in a good and productive and loving way with seichel. Don't become angry, don't become a meshugana, and don't become abusive. With seichel, with ava. You want to be a parent who creates healthy structures so that our children should be able to blossom. And I know it's a big nisayon, it's not an easy thing, but this is the challenge of our time, and we have to embrace it with passion and with gusto and with commitment.
Thank you. I think it's a perfect segue for this. Do you hear me, Rabbi YY?
I hear you beautifully.
Everyone's only another 10 minutes, so we'll try to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, excellent question. Excellent question. The answer is time, time, time. Let's begin with the spouse. It's very, very important to spend time with your spouse. I would suggest try every day or every other day, as often as you can. Take a walk. Take a walk for 30 minutes. Doesn't have to be a walk for 3 hours. Even 30 minutes, even 25 minutes, 40 minutes. And no phones. Maybe your wife could take a phone in case, there's an urgent thing one of the children needs. But generally, take a walk. Just take a walk. And just bond. Just connect. Just talk about the weather. Talk about the birds that are chirping. Talk about whatever you want to talk about. But just bond, and be curious. It's not a time to be judgmental. Everybody's going through a lot. Be with your wife like you were on your dates. You remember on your dates? You were curious. You were inquisitive. You weren't judgmental. And you were interested. Just be like that. Let her be and let him be. Very important. Every day you have to take time to bond. Don't judge each other and don't just be critical of each other. Listen to each other. You don't have to agree with your spouse, but you have to trust your spouse. I don't need my wife to agree to everything I say. I hope she doesn't. And I don't need my husband to agree to everything I say. You don't need that. But you need to be able to lean on each other. You need to be able to trust each other. You need to be able to support each other. We don't have to agree 100% and see everything eye to eye, but we have to respect each other. And I have to know that you have my back, and you have to know that I have your back. And I have to know that I could be vulnerable with you, and you have to know that you could be vulnerable with me. And we could just trust each other and be here for each other. And every spouse has to know that in their spouse's eyes, they are the most important person in the world. If a husband can't feel that about the wife and the wife can't feel that about the husband, is nishta guta maisa. So this is work. It takes time. It takes work. And our children, also, this is an issue of time. And what I suggest to people very practically is, I once told somebody, he told me, I don't have no time for my kids. I say, why don't you pencil into your calendar that every night from 6:30 to 7:30, you have an appointment with your children. He says, no, appointments are for strangers. My children have me 24 hours a day. I said, you know what's going to happen? Your children are not even going to have you for 10 minutes a day. Let your children not be worse than strangers. Put them in your calendar. 6:30 to 8:30 every night, I have an appointment with my kids. We play Monopoly. We play chess. We do homework. We make Rice Krispie fluff treats. We make cholent. We make a kugel. We take a walk. We throw frisbees. We learn Gemara. We learn Mishnayos. We chat. We shmuaz. We connect. We play Uno. Whatever. Kol chad lefum shir delay. You'll figure out how to bond with your children. We go on a hike. We do exercise together. We go for a run, or we just sit and eat pizza. Kol chad lefum shir delay. Depends on your hygiene. Depends on your athletic abilities. Depends on your levels of obesity. But put them into your calendar. And unless there's an emergency, you just spend time. And when you spend time with them, it's not going to happen in one day, but they're going to start talking to you. I don't mean when they're 20 or when they're 17. I'm talking about when they're 4 and when they're 3 and when they're 2 and when they're 6 and when they're 7. And it's great. Go to bed with them. Tell them a good night story. In bed, sometimes you lay in bed with them and they're quiet and they're reading a book. But suddenly, after a half an hour, they start opening up and they tell you what happened in yeshiva and what this one said. And don't right away give solutions. Just listen, internalize, emote. Make them know that you understand them. Ask questions. Don't judge. My friends, seize every opportunity you can, but make it a kviyas. Make it a kviyas. Nighttime, bedtime, dinner. Ideally, every family should be having dinner every night together. It's very important. I don't mean a 2-hour dinner like the South Americans, halavai. But let it be a 15-minute dinner. But try to do it as much as you can. You sit around the table, and you know what? They learn to trust it. They learn that there's a father, there's a mother, there's conversation. Talk about your emotions, talk about your experiences. Tell them a personal story, tell them something interesting. And the more we can do it when they're young, the more there is this bond that's created as they get older. And I want to tell you something. There's a lot of challenges out there. A lot of addiction, a lot of depression, a lot of drugs, and a lot of suicide. And the greatest antidote to all of these tsaras is a good emotional relationship with your children. Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to ask the final question. And basically, I guess it's a combination of a few questions in general. Chizuk, people ask you what's the difference between Emunah and B'tachon. Okay, I don't know if you can answer the regular achas, but the question is that a general message of inspiration you give for people. People are saying that generally, not something to good about themselves, something motivation to keep on going forward, whether in Avodas Hashem, Parnasa, everything else we're talking about. What's the general advice you give to people? If you want to answer that from the you can, it's probably connected. By the way, everything you've been saying so far, in my opinion, afterwards we have to send this to a transcriber, make a small contrast, a book, and put out. Q&A for Rabbi YY, these are Dvarma and Yerusha Shalayla, and the other Mizalzal. It's really incredible. I really think everything is a sheer within of itself that you're able to encapsulate in only a few minutes. It's really, really amazing. There's no words. I myself, I'm watching this. I was like, guys, you have to listen to this. You have to watch this. Baruch Hashem, it's being recorded, and we can send it to people afterwards. It's really, you're being nonsense people's nefashos here. People, you're doing pity shway for people's souls. I'm watching.
The Eibishter is a helfen weiter.
As you're speaking, I'm watching so many people. Their faces are lighting up when you're saying certain words. They're connecting to what you're saying, and it's really, really appreciative. So I'll turn it to you to the final questions. Basically, divrei hadrach and chizuk.
Yeah.
Why?
So everybody knows the Mishnah, the sugya of these days, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Zman HaTshuva. Amar Rebbe Akiva, Ashreichem, Yisrael. Lifnei mi atem metaharim, umi metahir eschem. And he finishes, the pasuk says in Yirmiyah, Mikveh Yisrael Hashem. Ma mikveh metahir es hatmeim, af HaKadosh Baruch Hu metahir es Yisrael. Everybody knows the niggin of Lag BaOmer that really took off in Klal Yisrael. Ma mikveh metahir es hatmeim, af HaKadosh Baruch Hu metahir es Yisrael. But the question that's been asked, and we spoke about it different times, different explanations. What's the greatest chiddush of Rabbi Akiva? Hashem is like a mikveh. Okay, pseider. Hashem is like a mikveh. I mean, it says mikveh Yisrael Hashem, but you know that mikveh over there doesn't mean a mikveh. Mikveh there comes from the word tikveh, like kaveh el Hashem. It's a different koiveh Hashem. Mikveh Yisrael Hashem means the hope. The hope of Yisrael is the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Rabbi Akiva takes the word mikveh, and from mikveh, which is tikva, hope, like it says in the Haftarah in Yirmiyah, in Yecheskel, oid lo yavda tikvaseinu. They say of the tikvaseinu in Yecheskel about the Atzamas HaYavesha. So he took mikveh and he turned it from hope into a mikveh, from the word mikveh mayim. And he says, okay, Hashem is a mikveh. Just like a mikveh is metayr tmeim, Hashem, it's like ganze pilpul. What do you need a pilpul? It's like Zerah Shavah, that Hashem is like a mikveh. So Hashem is metayr us. What's wrong with a pasuk? It says in Parshas Acharei Mos, ki bayom hazeh yichaper aleichem, l'tayr eschem mekel chat eseichem, l'fnei Hashem titaru. No, so you need a Zerah Shavah, Hashem is like a mikveh. A mikveh is metayr. Oh, Hashem is also like a mikveh. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of psukim in the whole Tanakh that Hashem is metayr Yidden. Comes in Bakiva and says, he's like a mikveh. So there's different ideas have been said, but today I'm sharing one very simple idea. What's a mikveh? A mikveh is, I'm not tahir, I'm not pure, whether it's a man or a woman. I go to the mikveh, I go into the mikveh, I come out, and I become tahir. Okay. There's man habayis, a person touched a sheretz, he went to the mikveh. Yeah. Anida went to the mikveh till today. Azov, you touched tumah. People, you went to the mikveh. You went to the Beis Hamikdash. You go to the mikveh. Kohen has to eat truma. He has to go to the mikveh if he was tameh. Yeah. Then there's Tfilas Ezra. People would go to the mikveh constantly. Yeah. By Chassidim, by Mekabalim, they're always going to the mikveh. Shabbos, Sheni, Chamishi, every day. The result, mikveh. Go to the mikveh. I'm tameh. I go to the mikveh. I become tar. The next day, I touch the tumah again. I come back to the mikveh. Does the mikveh ever tell me, Rabbi YY, you were here yesterday, was comes to tzedek? You ever heard the mikveh tell that to anybody? No. You were here yesterday, and you came back today. Next day you come to the mikveh. What are you here? I don't understand. You came here yesterday. I made you pure. I made you holy. Leave. Stay up here. No, I went to sleep. This happened. That happened. I touched this. I went through this. The mikveh says, look, I never heard a mikveh complain. The mikveh is not begrudging, no grudges. Mikveh doesn't harbor resentment. The mikveh is open. Often a mikveh, they say in Yiddish. The mikveh is open. You went today, you went yesterday, you could have gone an hour ago. As long as you have a key to the mikveh. As long as you have a key to the mikveh is always open, always welcoming. It always smiles, never has issues. You can come 100 times a day, 100 times a week. You can come 1,000 times a year, I don't care. Says Rabbi Akiva, Mikveh Yisrael Hashem. The Rebbeinu Shalom is like a mikveh. Person thinks, I came to Hashem last year, I come back this year. You were here last year, what are you going to nudge me? Before Zashir. A normal person, you came yesterday, you came 2 days ago, you came 10 days ago. What are you coming back? Genug schon. No, I have to do tshuva again, I still have my issues. Leave me alone, I dealt with you already. You can't figure out your life, don't come back to me, go to a therapist. Comes Rabbi Akiva and says, maybe you have to go to a therapist. But Mikveh Yisrael Hashem. The Rebbeinu Shalom is a mikveh. Kens kommen und kommen und kommen. And I want to say, this mikveh is always hot. You don't have to wait for them to fill up the mikveh. You could come and come again and come again and come again. I don't get bored of you. I don't get disgusted with you. I don't get turned off from you. You were here an hour ago and you said, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. And you're here an hour later and you say again, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. I welcome every gesture. I welcome every hug. I welcome every moment of the relationship. I welcome every tenuah of tshuva. I welcome every word, every thought, every action, because I love you at your core. And therefore never ever think that I'm so disappointed with you that at some point I'm like, get out of my life. Says Rabbi Akiva, never. Hashem is a mikveh. And the mikveh is always open, available, and waiting for you to make the turn, to be toivel, tefillah. Says the Mittler Rebbe's Oisius, habittel. The Rambam says tefillah is tefillah b'mei hadas hatoyer. Put your head under the water, forget your past, become a naya metzias, kekatan shanoyla dami, and I'm always here for you. So my dear friends, comes this time of the year, the worst mistake that people make is that they give up on themselves. They think they're too anxious, they're too traumatized, they're too sinful, they're too not interested, they're too apathetic. We all have apathy. We all have indifference. We all got skeletons. Trust me, we all got trauma. The only people that I know that are perfect are the people I don't know. But I always remember what the Simcha Binim of Pshischa said. This is Yakar Mikal Yakar, Reb Nasa. Yakar Mikal Yakar. He said, we finish Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur, and we start Ma'ariv. How does Ma'ariv begin? V'hu rachum yichaper avoin. Excuse moi, yichaper avoin. I just finished Ne'ilah. I don't have any Avedis anymore. What is the yichaper avoin? Mele, later at night, you could say Psaloshen Hara, Arechilis, a Bittel Teure, a this, a Jens. From Ne'ilah you went into Ma'ariv. Nobody had a time to sin, especially in the shuls. They rush from Ne'ilah to Ma'ariv. So there's not even a juicy conversation between Ne'ilah and Ma'ariv. I just finished Ne'ilah. I screamed Shema Yisrael, Hashem Hu Elokim 7 times. L'shana Ba B'Yerushalayim. We blew shofar, we said Kaddish, and we went into Ma'ariv. Where's the Oven? Who sinned? And then you come to Shemona Esrei that night, Ma'ariv, Yom Kippur, Mitzvah Yom Kippur, and you say, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu, chalanu malkeinu ki fashanu. Come on, where's the Aveda? So Reb Simcha Binim of Pshischa said, open your hearts, listen to this. He said, you know what the Aveda of Mitzvah Yom Kippur is? You know what Yechaper Oven is? The Aveda is that people don't believe that Hashem has forgiven them. That's the Aveda of Mitzvah Yom Kippur. You don't have any sins, you're clean, but you don't believe it. The Aveda of Mitzvah Yom Kippur is, I don't believe that Hashem forgave me. I believe that I am damaged goods. I believe that I had too of a difficult childhood and I made too many mistakes in my life and I got too many issues. I could never have a good, happy, successful, awesome, meaningful, inspiring, uplifted life. I can't live in this world as an empowered Jew, as an ambassador of the Rebbeinu Shalom, an ambassador of love, light, hope, wisdom, healing, authenticity, truth, and redemption. Me, I'm damaged goods. says, "V'hu rachem mechaper oven, slach lanu avinu ki chatanu," that you don't believe you were forgiven. He says, "Ayid av gleiben be'emunah shleima," that you're clean, you're good, you're pure, you're wonderful. Why? Because your essence is divine. Your essence is not dirty. Your externals are dirty. So you clean off the stains and you go back. Tshuva means going back, returning to who you always were. Who were you always? Shlucha shel Adam K'moisa. You're a manifestation of Hashem in this world. I wish you all, my dear brothers and sisters, a lichtike yar, a gesunte yar, a freiliche yar, a geuladike yar, a year filled with bracha v'hatzlacha ad bli dai, and a year in which all of us should be able to see psuris toivus, yeshuas, nachamas, b'toiv ha'nira v'hanigla, and the year of the ultimate kabetz nidachenu ma'arba kanfis ha'aretz. Some Sefer says, Tovshin Pei Aleph, may ashpois, Tovshin Bal, may ashpois yorim evyon, with the geula shleima b'mheira b'yameinu, amen, a gut gebencht yor tayere yidden.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rabbi YY. I don't know how you do it. It even just sounds like you're just getting started. Like
Well, it's morning. It's Vasikin now in Eretz Yisrael. Listen, Ayid is in Eretz Yisrael always. So Mela in Eretz Yisrael is now Vasikin. So we have to already get ready for the morning.
It's really, really amazing, and we're definitely going to take this video and we're going to post it online for people to see. We'll share with your friends. We're going to send that
Thank you.
to people so they can share it right there. It's really, I don't say why we're off the cuff because it's not, but it's really deep, deep things. Each one requires study, analysis, in depth, and things that can really, you can take each thing he said and use it as your avodah for the rest of the year. Especially now, it's transformative, it's informative, and it really has the ability to touch people's souls and neshama. And it was an amazing thing to watch it live, especially now. You know, usually when you speak in front of a big audience, you're speaking, you don't see them. I get to watch the people here, and I'm seeing how they're responding. So I want to thank you so much. I want to thank everyone.
Thank you. Amen, amen, amen.